friends, welcome to our new episode. My name is Rusif Huseynov, and together with a colleague Shujaat Ahmadzada, we'll be talking about the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process within the Peace Agora initiative. Hello Shujaat, glad to see you.
Thank you.
Shujaat, as I said already, today we are focusing on the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. For the past few months, if not years, especially since 2020, I've come to this very conclusion that there are two major developments here in South Caucasus which will eventually design or determine the future look of our region. I'm putting aside all external factors. These are the Armenia-Azerbaijan process, its outcome, or the lack of any result. And the second is the internal happenings in Georgia. What kind of foreign policy priorities Tbilisi will opt for. So again, we put other topics or subtopics aside, and today we are focusing on our subject. Prior to COP29, there was some optimism about the signing of a peace deal, maybe in Baku, maybe within the framework of this mega event. Eventually, we saw that it was never materialized. However, the optimism about the upcoming peace deal is still there. The probability may go a little bit lower due to some other factors, due to mutual accusations between the parties. However, behind the closed doors, the process is happening. And according to the latest update, some 80 or even 90% of the text has already been agreed upon. Now, after this some introduction, I want to pass the floor to you in order to understand where we stand today in terms of the peace negotiation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. What are the main challenges and obstacles?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, indeed, we are seeing some, let's say, though it would be called a bit cliche, but unprecedented shifts in terms of where Armenia and Azerbaijan stand. After 2020, more precise, after 2023. For the first time in the history of this conflict, though there were times, of course, in the past, Armenia and Azerbaijan are negotiating bilaterally. So they don't have multilateral framework for their conflict or dispute resolution. Prior to that, they had, now they don't have. And now they are, I think my understanding is they're adapting how to negotiate bilaterally. And it's somehow fixed in my understanding that both parties are kind of have come to an agreement that any solution to Armenian and Azerbaijani dispute should come in a bilateral form. This is a big difference if we compare it to the, let's say, pre-2023 period when you had a wide range of international actors. Until 2020, it was consolidated Minsk group, and until 2023 it was like a rivalry of many actors, US, EU, Russia on the one hand, and many small on the other, like Hungary, even Kazakhstan to a certain extent. But after that, you don't have them anymore, and you have also parties agreeing not to have them anymore. This is a huge shift, which in my understanding should be welcome, because this is in itself creates an institutional groundwork for Armenian and Azerbaijani bilateral peace to emerge, because Armenian and Azerbaijani peace peace and conflict in both categories should be bilateral. Yeah. Despite having extra bilateral, let's say, regional or global implications, such as the other things influencing this process, it should be bilateral at the end of the day. The peace agreement, you rightly said, that is something that has long been desired, especially in the past 2 years, but never materialized. I wouldn't delve too much into that, because perhaps we have better answers to that, why we haven't seen a peace agreement as in a one document. But in my understanding, Peace agreement should be seen, which is not both in Armenia and Azerbaijan, as part of a wider process, which is, I think, in my understanding, is lacking. So we have a bilateral negotiation of the peace process, which we don't have a peace process at the end, but we don't have process per se that covers Armenian and Azerbaijani, let's say, reconciliation bilaterally. In my understanding, that should be our main goal, towards which we should work to, in order to have not only one type of negotiations happening between two capitals, two foreign ministers, but also have a wider bilateral mechanisms expanded and enhanced that could, let's say, cover areas such as business people, emergency preparedness, agricultural communities, medical communities, or tourism, or youth, or media, or journalists, and many other fields that could kind of supplement this already happening bilateral negotiations.
Before we develop this very subtopic you just initiated, let me add a couple of arguments from my side. What you said about the bilateral nature between the Armenia and Azerbaijan and the shift in perceptions, even in terminology, because if you recall, we all definitely recall, prior to 2020, what we would usually hear about our conflict, especially in Azerbaijani media, it was usually referred to as the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict over Karabakh or over Nagorno-Karabakh. However, since 2020, especially since 2023, the very term Karabakh was omitted. And nowadays we present it not only as the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, but as Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, because nowadays we have this peace process between the two states, concrete states. There is no more secessionist movement. There is no breakaway territory, which also wants to be part of party to the conflict. Another issue which has attracted my attention, again, it's about the bilateral nature of this current process. Unfortunately, since 1988, when the conflict first broke out, until very recently, whatever changes, especially dramatic changes, took place in our whole context, usually occurred through coercive measures. It's the occupation of the Azerbaijani territories, the deportation of the Azerbaijanis from Karabakh, and then Azerbaijan's military way of reconquering or liberating the occupied lands. If you recall, even the liberation of the province of Lachen, despite all these prior oral agreements, we somehow faced this resistance from the Armenian side to peacefully vacate the province of Lachen, and then the Azerbaijani side again had to undertake some coercive measures. However, maybe, please correct me if I'm wrong, for the first time in 35 years, the very first peaceful agreement between the two belligerent parties, which actually resulted in something very, very tangible, took place in December last year, when the Azerbaijani side handed over several Armenian detainees to the government in Yerevan, and in exchange, the authorities in Armenia supported Azerbaijan's COP29 bid, and it has a sequel which took place several months later during spring, when the Armenian side, again in a very peaceful manner, handed over to us for villages in the Kazakh area. So these were very good signs
Yeah.
about the success of this bilateral nature of this process, because for many years, for many decades, there has been a perception that the Armenians and Azerbaijanis are not able to just sit down and speak to each other without an intermediary.
Yeah, I think I'll add up to, because yes, I totally agree that in the past, this is 30 years, what has been achieved by through the war and coercive measures, both in Armenian and Azerbaijani, it doesn't matter. The thing is, I think that was the biggest kind of obstacle in front of sitting down bilaterally and having all these agreements.
It's a psychological barrier.
Yeah, a psychological barrier. Also, I think there is a huge, very deep mistrust between the parties. So the either side believes that the other side is ill-intentioned, and is trying to just run away from the agreed upon, let's say, commitments, and that makes kind of by default necessity of going for the others, looking for their help, so you could balance this misbehavior of the other party, and which is, in my understanding, is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, as in you are coming to the negotiations believing that the other side is to misbehave, and you want to help the others, so you could prevent the misbehavior of that party, your rival. And in that case, you have the other party coming by default out of necessity, and both parties acting in this way. I think the biggest achievement, if we could call it an achievement, of the past 35 years is that we kind of broke this understanding that despite having a very deep, huge there's a mistrust between the Armenian and Azerbaijani and its officials, or let's say Armenians and Azerbaijanis, we could still sit down and look, not the help of the others, but try to come up with some sort of agreements. Here, I would definitely highly, let's say, speak of highly this April agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, because it's the first time in the history of this conflict that both parties agreed upon devising or making land bilaterally, because it's the first time they agree upon the borders.
Right.
There was no precedent.
Absolutely. I agree that it was a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And again, it was not only about several villages which were consequently handed over to the Azerbaijani side, but it was also about generating some optimism for the future interactions. A couple of minutes ago, I said how this conflict was transformed into the Armenia-Azerbaijan process. Yet we still have this societal dimension of this conflict. It is still the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict also, which brings another topic or subtopic. To what extent are the societies ready or prepared for future reconciliation? Because let me mention once again that this discussion is part of the Peace Agora initiative, a Baku-based expert community who is dealing with the Armenia-Azerbaijan reconciliation process. Since 2020, there have been a lot of initiatives and frameworks for the track to diplomacy between the Armenian and Azerbaijani expert communities, societies, and what I actually like about them, some of them, is that they are usually designed to address very specific subjects, which was not the case before 2020. However, nowadays we have different topics which are being discussed freely, sometimes with the mediators, sometimes, again, bilaterally, about how combating hate speech in both societies and in both countries' media outlets. It's about how to establish fertile ground for, let's say, economic normalization or some mechanisms for joint emergency or disaster response. You are part of such initiatives. I usually attend such sessions, and they raise very concrete subjects which several years ago were considered even taboo topics in both societies. However, this psychological barrier is also being broken nowadays.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, maybe you have noticed this, that nowadays we also are in a phase that many of the things that were unthinkable could be achieved. As in, we could have, for example, on the borders, right? Nowadays, I mean, for the most of the time, we had a highly militarized border. Now you have, of course, still, but you have a small, very tiny section in the north that is demarcated and got replaced by both ends with the, let's say, half civilian border protection services, which means that now, though I'm a bit, also it's a bit matter of concern, as in how borderized, let's say, communities could interact with each other, but yet still comparatively, it's way better than they had until 2024. So you have this real ground there that is conducive for day-to-day peacemaking.
Yeah.
So you have the possibility of people, not only possible, but we have a necessity of people coming to an understanding what to do with the other side. Because at some point of their daily life, there will be, let's say, periods when a cattle will be going from the one part to another part. There will be matter of necessity of using the water resources, pastoral areas. So it is not something that you think of in a big terms like conflict, peace, Armenia-Azerbaijan, but on a your daily basis.
Exactly. Just to support your argument, yes, I also remember these very interesting cases about cattle, for instance, and the handover of cattle, let's say like several cows, would usually involve the policymakers from both capitals. But you are right, such things could also be resolved, like at the community level.
Yeah, even on the individual level.
Exactly.
Like you don't need the call to capital to just make sure that few cows are returned. So you could, by default creates a ground where individuals could be, to a certain degree, mediators.
That's. I agree with this argument. And also remember this funny anecdote which took place a year ago or 2 years ago. I remember I was part of this closed session where several Armenian and Azerbaijani experts separately discussed what kind of post for first steps could be taken in the name of economic normalization. So we were supposed to prepare a list of ideas, and after 1 hour of brainstorming, these two groups came back together and compared their lists, their respective lists. And guess what? I mean, if anyone else told me this, I would have never believed. But it happened like in my own presence. The very several ideas that topped both lists were the same. And the very, very, very first idea was about common bazaar, trans-border bazaar, and it's understandable because one of the very primitive things which could definitely generate some interaction, like daily interaction between the common people, could be market, could be trade, etc. And we also had this very successful experience for so many years in southern Georgia, where Sadakhlo, very, very famous one, where Armenians and Azerbaijanis, not only from Georgia, but also from Armenia and Azerbaijan respectively, could go and trade one another.
That is definitely, so you come to the point when even scholars speaking to certain degrees that conflict is something not that you want to put an end, but rather it's also part of the life that you're coming up with individual strategies how to deal with. So it is you're understanding at an individual level that there is an antagonism with the other side for a number of reasons, but you're also understanding that for your daily life to be sustainable and the support of communities, you need to have interaction.
Exactly.
You need to have a individual level, community level management system for this interaction. I think that is the very first thing that is happening in the let's say in the period of 30 years. So we didn't have this. We had huge barrier, invisible but still there. There was a barrier for this not to happen.
Yeah, I agree. What we're discussing is extremely interesting. However, I want to leave some more subjects for our next conversation. Let's slowly come to the end of this discussion, and I would also challenge you by asking your expectations about the next year, because this discussion is being recorded at the end of 2024. We have we are entering the new year with new opportunities and with new challenges. So you go first, and then I'll also share my opinion.
I think Armenia and Azerbaijan have reached a point when reaching an agreement is easier than any other time. At the same time, not reaching an agreement is riskier than any other time. Riskier in the sense that perhaps many would agree that, especially after the Ukraine war and the war in the Middle East, you have very clear-cut, let's say, differences between the certain parts of the world that is a bit reminiscent of the Cold War period. As in, you have a very huge geopolitical confrontation. And not having an Armenian-Azerbaijan agreement means that each day that there is no Azerbaijan-Armenian agreement, there is an increased risk of this lack of agreement becoming sort of to a certain degree proxy of the wider process that's happening. So it is very weird momentum. On the one hand, we have as an Armenians and Azerbaijanis agency. On the other hand, us not using this agency could create a situation in which we end up having no agency at all. Mm-hmm. So I think from that perspective, the sooner Armenian and Azerbaijani agreement is reached, is better for anyone involved. And we should also understand that this would come in a regional setting, as it probably followed up by Armenian-Turkish agreement.
I totally share your view, and I also had a similar opinion about us. When I say us, I mean like the entire global population entering a new era, which is characterized at this moment by a lot of uncertainty. The world which we knew, which we used to live in, the unipolar American hegemony and all these things is coming to an end, or is transforming into something. And there are some known unknowns, and there are a lot of unknown unknowns, as one of famed American politicians put it several years ago. And in this world of uncertainty, we don't know how the conflict in Ukraine would end up, as you said. The conflict in the Middle East, and there are renewed hostilities in Syria, and we don't know to what extent they would have spillovers to our region. And we are actually neighboring the Middle East via Turkey and Iran. And with Trump's new administration, we can also face American Chinese rivalry all over the world. So this whole situation brings us a lot of questions. You are right. In order to at least secure ourselves at a certain level, we should definitely have some sort of peace deal, a non-aggression pact between Armenia and Azerbaijan, in order to be able to enter this new era of uncertainty. So let's finish our conversation today, Shujaat.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm already looking forward to new discussions.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you, dear friends, for your patience, for being with us, and have a great day.